Hi, I'm Henry Smith. Welcome to Digging for Truth, where we explore and defend the historical reliability of the 66 books of the Old and New Testaments. Today, our guest is Dr. Todd Bolen, founder of Bible Places and professor of biblical studies at the Masters University in California. Now, Dr. Bolen will be here for 2 episodes, and we'll be talking about the Babylonian destruction of Jerusalem under the reign of King Nebuchadnezzar. Dr. Bolen, welcome back to Digging for Truth. Good to have you back on the show.
Thank you. I'm happy to be back with you.
All right. When we say you're back, it's because we did 2 episodes on Queen Esther in Susa in the Persian Empire. We want to encourage folks to go watch those episodes, and we'll put that information up on screen. But as a matter of a little reintroduction, in case folks didn't see those episodes yet, tell us a little bit about your ministries at Bible Places and your teaching ministry there at the school.
So I teach at the Masters University, as you said, and I started off teaching on our Israel campus, and I just loved it there, traveling around the land of Israel, and now I'm teaching at the home campus, teaching general Bible classes and specific electives in history of ancient Israel and Psalms and Isaiah. But in my spare time, I continue to develop photo collections. So many of the thousands of pictures that I took while living there and in the years since traveling back and forth, uh, crafting those into collections that are going to be useful to others. So we have collections of certain countries, Greece and Turkey. We have collections of regions like Galilee and Jerusalem and Judah. And the design there is that any individual, a serious student or a teacher, can just grab whatever pictures they say. I need a bunch of pictures of Capernaum, or I want to see, what did Corinth look like, and have ready access to those. And then in the more recent years, we've begun building photo collections that illustrate biblical books. And so just going through each book, we started with the Gospels. So Matthew chapter 1 and verse 1 and on through, and not every verse has a picture, but many verses have lots of interesting pictures of the sites where these events took place, and also artifacts that are related to the accounts. And so crafting these collections, and I don't do it all. Most of the work is done by a group of friends. That we have a team that builds these over years. We've been working on this now for about 8 years, starting with, as I said, with the Gospels, and we're getting close to finishing the New Testament. We've done a lot of books in the Old Testament as well, including we're just close to finishing the book that is most relevant to our topic today, and that is the book of Kings, First and Second Kings.
Excellent. Well, we encourage folks to go there. And as I mentioned in our Esther episodes, you allow us to use photographs for our show and for our magazine for free. And we're very grateful that we partner in ministry that way. Appreciate that generosity from you. All right, but now we're going to shift. We're going to talk about something not so pleasant for the people of Judah, and that is the capture and the destruction of Judah by the Babylonians. But let's set the stage. What's taking place as we lead up to this horrific moment in time in antiquity?
So, yeah, we're going to focus on that destruction, which, as you said, is so unpleasant for the people of Jerusalem and Judah. But for an archaeologist, it's like treasure. I mean, because it's in the destruction layers that the evidence is preserved. But how do we get there? How do we get to 586, or some say 587 BC? Well, we get there after a long time of the Lord's patience. I mean, really, that's the right way to say it, that God has been so gracious to his people. He's provided everything they needed. He's given them kings, but they've turned away from him. And so he sent prophets. And what did they do? I mean, they just turned away from him. They spurned his grace. They rejected his word. They even killed some of his prophets. Actually, this morning in my personal Bible time, I read about how they killed Uriah the prophet. We don't even know about him. He didn't write a book or whatever. They killed him. That's in the days in the book of Jeremiah.
Yeah.
And so that's what's going on. There's a brief reprieve with Josiah. He was a good king. Oh, what a good king he was. But it wasn't enough, because when Josiah died, his sons were wicked. And so now that wickedness here it's going to tie into the invasion of the Babylonians. And here comes Nebuchadnezzar. So the first invasion of Nebuchadnezzar is mentioned in the book of Daniel. That's when Daniel and his friends are carried off. So the stories we know about the fiery furnace, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that's because the Babylonians under Nebuchadnezzar came and carried off captives in the year 605. That's not the destruction of Jerusalem, but that's preparation. And then they come back again, and here's why: because the dumb king of Judah, forgive me there, but he's not listening to God, and he rebels against the Babylonians. And so Nebuchadnezzar says, I'm not going to take it anymore, marches on Jerusalem and lays siege to it. Now the king of Judah, his name is Jehoiakim, he dies before Nebuchadnezzar can lay his hands on him. So it's going to be his son Jehoiachin who has to face the music, and he's going to be the one deported. The year is 597. So again, we don't have a destruction layer from this time because Jerusalem's not destroyed. But Jehoiachin's carried off, and also the prophet Ezekiel and a lot of other people, thousands of people, are carried off. And let me add, so we have this in the Bible, 2 Kings 24 and some other passages in Jeremiah, but we also have archaeological evidence for this invasion. So it's in the Babylonian Chronicle, where Nebuchadnezzar mentions that he laid siege. In fact, the date is given. We know the date, in March of the year 597, when the city falls, and the people of Judah, Jerusalem, are carried off. And so Nebuchadnezzar then is going to put Zedekiah on the throne, and thinking that he's going to be compliant, and yet, what do you know? But Zedekiah is also going to rebel. So that's the lead-in to the destruction of the city.
Yeah, and just a couple thoughts there, and then we'll go to our break. You know, a lot of people try to depict the quote unquote God of the Old Testament as this malevolent figure, but the truth of the matter is we see this trace of His grace over and over again. I'm reminded of Psalm 106, you know, where God just lays out this indictment against Israel, and they get to a point where they actually murder their own children in sacrifices to Canaanite gods. So this is no just capricious acts by the Lord, but the result of many centuries of rebellion against His word. And friends, we're here with Dr. Todd Bolen talking about the destruction of Jerusalem and the Babylonian invasion. We'll be right back.
In a culture of intense Bible-denying skepticism, Associates for Biblical Research exists to strengthen followers of Jesus by affirming the authority of the Bible. Our archaeological fieldwork and original research form a strong foundation in upholding the reliability of the Scriptures. For students or anyone asking if they can really trust the Bible, please visit our website and partner with us by joining our prayer team or financially supporting this ministry. And thank you for standing with us.
Hi, welcome back to Digging for Truth. I'm Henry Smith. I'm here with Dr. Todd Bolen, and we're talking about the Babylonian invasion of Judah and the eventual destruction of Jerusalem. Now, Todd, we kind of left off in the last segment talking about God's kindness towards Israel, actually the opposite of how it's often portrayed. He gives them sort of, through the king, Zedekiah, one last chance, but he blows it just like everybody else. So what's life kind of like during this time? We're getting close to the destruction, but we're still about 10, 11 years away.
That's right. And the information, so like, how do we even know what I'm going to tell you about what life was like? We don't have, at this point now, we don't have Babylonian records. So the Babylonian Chronicle that I talked about before in connection with Nebuchadnezzar's attack in 597, it breaks off in 594. I mean, if you could ask some archaeologists or historians, like, so if you could have any, discovery, whatever, on their list is going to be, if we could have the rest of the Babylonian Chronicle that describes the conquest of Jerusalem in these last days of Zedekiah, because we don't have that. Egyptian sources, likewise, pretty paltry. But the Bible, so Jeremiah and the Book of Kings, they tell us that Zedekiah, now he's a son of Josiah, so you might think like, oh, well, that's, but he wasn't a very good king. He was a weak king. His advisors, they were corrupt. They did not guide him well at all, certainly not in the ways of the Lord. And Zedekiah, he was too much of a coward to stand up to them. And we know this because Jeremiah's knocking on his door saying, hey, do what's right and turn to the Lord. And on several occasions, Zedekiah actually sought counsel from Jeremiah, but every time he rejected it. And so this is going to lead Ezekiel, the prophet, to say in his book that Zedekiah is a profane and wicked prince of Israel. I mean, this is, and what do you expect? I mean, it's going to happen. I mean, the Lord he's been forbearing, patient so long, but so these last days, here's the big thing: the kingdom of Judah is wavering, and Zedekiah, of course, at the helm, between these two nations, that they could side with Babylon, or they could side with Egypt. And so back and forth, and I can imagine, the newspapers of those days, the question is, who's Judah going to trust? And today they're siding with these, this kingdom, and tomorrow that, and there's probably some editorials saying, oh, Judah, you need to, go with Egypt. And yet there's, during Zedekiah's reign, at one point, he's actually taken to Babylon to pay tribute to Nebuchadnezzar and to affirm his loyalty. So you think like, okay, well, that does it. He's going to stay loyal to Babylon. But no, when there's a new pharaoh, and there was a new discovery for this pharaoh just not long ago, the pharaoh Hophra, or Apries, that was discovered, this border stela, and we don't know much about this pharaoh. That discovery, helps, corroborate his existence or whatever. But the point here is that when Zedekiah sees his opportunity, I'm going to join with the Egyptians. That's the last straw for Babylon.
Yeah. So again, we're left with the circumstances of sort of. There's not there. You said it's funny too. I was thinking of the apple and the tree as it relates to Zedekiah and Josiah. That's one. No guarantee of transference of faithfulness from generation to generation. Same thing in the church. We have to be vigilant for the next generation of folks. The other thing is, you kind of feel for Judah in some ways, in the sense of there's sort of the Poland of, Poland stuck between Nazi Germany and the communist Soviet Union in terms of threat. But, Poland didn't have the Lord, but the people of Judah did, and they continually rejected him. Just really tragic circumstances.
That's right. That's really key to the whole geographical dynamic. So why did God choose the land of Canaan to put his people there? Because as you said, I mean, it wasn't just in the time of Jeremiah and Josiah that they were in between these two powers. That was so much of their history. And here's the point: they're going to have to rely on the Lord. The only way you're going to make it. And you know what? When they did God come through? Right? I mean, every time.
Every time, that's right. Yeah.
But when they didn't, then judgment fell.
Yeah, that's right. So we should mention too, this Pharaoh Hophra, this stela that was discovered made our top 10 list for the year 2021. So we encourage folks to go back and watch that. So Todd, I thought maybe we would, since we have a little extra time in this segment, let's move into some material we planned on the next segment, just set the stage. Let's begin talking about a little bit of this evidence for the invasion. Maybe start with introducing the Lachish letters, and then we'll expand on that a lot in our next segment.
Yes. So the archaeologists have found a lot of evidence for the destruction of Judah. So we're going to focus on Jerusalem, but it's other cities as well that they excavated Gezer, just Babylonian destruction, and at Bet Shemesh, also in the Shvelah, and out near the Dead Sea in Gedi, and further south in the Negev, Arad, and near Jerusalem, Ramat Rahel, and many other places. The archaeologists have found where the Babylonians marched through. But the most Interesting, as you said, it's Lachish. And Lachish, so maybe make this is a good clarification to make. Um, People who are familiar with the archaeology here know of the dramatic destruction of Lachish in the time of Sennacherib and the Assyrians, 701 BC, and all kinds of archaeological remains related to that. But that's not this. And just to clarify, it's like, does Lachish show up again in the archaeological and biblical record as being a major city of Judah that was conquered by the invader, first the Assyrians and now the Babylonians, and that's exactly it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's excellent. And I think that does set the stage. We're going to talk about in our next segment the Lachish letters. We'll leave that for our next segment. But in terms of Lachish, this is again, I'll give you 30 seconds to comment on this. The nature again of the eyewitness. Lachish is a key city. We go to the archaeology, we find the evidence. Yes, it's in a strategic location. It fits the biblical account. Maybe comment on that a little bit before we go to our break.
It does, and as I said, it's not only the Babylonian destruction, but the Assyrian as well. It's not on the normal tourist route, but I love taking my students to Lachish and standing there because it does match so well the biblical account, both of Sennacherib's attack and then later the Babylonian invasion, the destruction of level 3 and then level 2, and the Lachish reliefs, the famous reliefs in Nineveh, and then we have the Lachish letters.
Yes, and we're going to gear up for that in our next segment. Friends, thank you for joining us for Digging for Truth. We're talking about the Babylonian destruction of Jerusalem and Judah, and we'll be right back.
Bible in Spade is a non-technical quarterly publication published by the Associates for Biblical Research. Written from a scholarly and conservative viewpoint, Bible in Spade supports the inerrancy of the biblical record and is a must-read for both the serious Bible student and anyone asking if they can really trust the Bible. Archaeological evidence, properly interpreted, upholding the history of the Bible. Subscribe today at BibleArchaeology.org.
Digging for Truth is produced and recorded in the studios of Lighthouse TV, positively different television.
Hi, I'm Henry Smith. Welcome back to Digging for Truth. I'm here with Dr. Todd Bolen. The subject we are talking about is the Babylonian invasion of Judah and the destruction of Jerusalem around 586 BC. Okay, Todd, we brought up the Lachish letters. We kind of teased that, and then we didn't get into it. So we need to do that now. Now, you were emphasizing the importance of Lachish. We were both doing that. It's just from a strategic standpoint, from the standpoint of we have evidence from the Davidic period, David's period, that it was an important site as well. But let's focus our energy on these letters, and maybe you can give a little bit of a tutorial on that as well.
Yes, so the archaeologists were working in the city gate, and of course, they're digging in different places, and there's been different campaigns too we can just throw in. This one I'm thinking of now where they made this dramatic discovery of the Lachish letters was the British expedition under James Leslie Starkey in the 1930s. And so they're digging away in the gatehouse, and they find there on the floor potsherds. Well, of course, potsherds are everywhere, but these are special because they are inscribed. And those familiar with archaeology, know well this phenomenon of ostraca, and of course the desire for archaeologists to find any kind of writing and being careful in the pottery washing. I remember many afternoons, with the ABR team washing pottery, and you want to be careful that there's any writing, whatever, that you identify, and of course you don't scrub it off. And well, they found about 20 inscribed potsherd, these ostraca, and they gave them numbers, Lachish letter number 1 and 2, and they tell us different things about what's going on there. Now, should maybe make it clear that these are potsherds. Okay, so they're not monumental inscriptions. This is somebody's note, like a Post-it note. They just kind of jotted real quickly. The potsherd just laying on the ground or whatever. They pick it up and they scratch something on there in haste. And so these different letters are written by different people. They're coming and going, to different places, and we don't always know. And a lot of time we just have to struggle to determine the meaning, the context, but the most interesting one for our subject now that actually talks about this invasion is the Lachish letter number 4. Lachish letter number 4 is interesting because it records the final days of Judah, and in fact, it parallels so nicely with what Jeremiah wrote in Jeremiah chapter 34. So I imagine, can't be sure, but something like, it's a Monday afternoon, and Jeremiah writes down in his book this verse is from Jeremiah 34 verses 6 and 7. Watch the city names here. Then Jeremiah the prophet told all this to Zedekiah, king of Judah, in Jerusalem, while the army of the king of Babylon was fighting against Jerusalem and the other cities of Judah that were still holding out. What were they? Lachish and Azekah. These are the only fortified cities left in Judah. So there we have an eyewitness testimony that the last 2 cities outside of Jerusalem that hadn't been conquered yet by the Babylonians, and this is the year now 586, some say 587, either way, this is the right before the conquest. It's Lachish and Azekah. Then watch this. So Lachish letter number 4 says this: we are watching for the signals of Lachish. So like the signal fires. They have a messaging system. They're looking out for this. There are, by the way, different interpretations, and because scholars love a good debate, and so different things have been written. But a general view of this, they're looking for the signal fires of Lachish, according to all the indications which my Lord hath given. For we cannot see the signals of Azekah. So what does that mean? I mean, Azekah has fallen. So Jeremiah 34, if that's written on a Monday, Lachish letter number 4 is written on a Wednesday or Thursday. I mean, it's very close in time, and we know the sequence. We know that Babylon conquered Azekah, and then Lachish fell, and that meant, here's the key, right, and why Lachish is so important, is that the way is open for Nebuchadnezzar to march on Jerusalem. And Zedekiah and his cronies in the city, they got to be shaking in their boots because, they know now their protected cities, they're gone.
Okay, so, a lot of times in archaeology, there's a lot of different ways we make connections to the biblical text, generic connections, cultural background, this kind of thing. But I love the way you describe this, Monday to Wednesday or a Thursday kind of thing, because there's no way to get away from the proximity of this. I mean, this is almost like the scribe is talking with Jeremiah in sequence. Like you could almost insert this into the biblical text. It's extraordinary. Just comment on that a little bit more. I'm so intrigued. I've always been so intrigued by this letter.
Yeah, I mean, that's why, and this is a sensation. I mean, when it was discovered, and of course, like I said, there's 20 Lachish letters, but focus usually goes right to this one because, I mean, it just matches up, so well with these final days recorded in the book of Jeremiah. And so, we don't, to be fair, we talk about archaeology in the Bible, and there's not a lot of specific events that archaeology speaks to. I mean, directly. I mean, that's, because, what's the nature of archaeological remains? You have some lady's jewelry, or you have a house, or you have some tomb, but to have like an event that is named specifically, I mean, like, wow, I mean, what an exciting thing. So yeah, you never, pass by Lachish without spending a good bit of time talking about going to the gatehouse, pointing, hey, there's where they found this letter that so strikingly confirms the biblical record in Jeremiah.
Yeah, and really appreciate your sharing the details of that. We don't find a lot of inscriptions in Israel as opposed to places like Mesopotamia, so this really makes this quite miraculous. Okay, I give you 30 seconds, Todd. That's put you on the spot. You got 30 seconds to wrap it up and get ready for part 2.
Yeah, so, again, I just, come back to, the Lord's faithfulness and the record of Jeremiah. He's not the only one, but it's also Habakkuk who's living in Zephaniah. And maybe the average reader doesn't realize that you have a proliferation of prophets right at the time of invasion. So now, why is that important? Because this is the time where it could seem like God is least in control. But what do the prophets say? God is most in control. And this invasion, this judgment, is actually from his sovereign hand, and he's going to use it to accomplish his purposes.
Yeah, amen to that. Well, friends, we hope you enjoyed this episode of Digging for Truth. Please come back for part 2 with Dr. Bolen. We'll be talking specifically about evidence for the destruction of Jerusalem. Thank you for joining us for Digging for Truth.